Kamala Harris comes into the 2024 election with just a 29% chance at actually winning. In this video, we're going to take a look at the 2024 electoral map between Harris and Trump based on current polling averages from every single state. We'll begin in Washington, where Kamala Harris leads by 15%, according to the only poll conducted here so far between her and the former president. This poll conducted by Survey USA. There are still many states where we don't have too much polling from, but we're going to get a lot in the coming weeks between Harris and Trump. But right now, Washington is solid blue based on the only poll that we have. In Oregon, we don't actually have any numbers here between the two candidates, but it is a traditionally solid blue state, so for now, we're going to place it into the safe blue category. California, though, this is actually Kamala Harris's home state. She served as a senator from California for 4 years before becoming vice president. Today, however, she leads by just 9 points over Donald Trump, according to an Emerson College poll from November of last year. So on our map, the Golden State will only be likely for the vice president. Next up, in Nevada, this has been a pretty close state in the last two elections. Joe Biden carried Nevada by 2.4%. Hillary Clinton won it by the same margin in 2016. But in 2024, Trump is making it seem like the silver state was never really that close, because looking at the polling, Trump leads by 7 points on average, according to the 3 polls we've seen in 2024 so far. We have 2 older polls conducted by the New York Times from last year. They're probably not going to be too accurate, but according to a poll conducted less than a week ago, Donald Trump leads by a double-digit margin over Kamala Harris in the state of Nevada. And so right now, Trump is on track to flipping it and becoming the first Republican to win Nevada since 2004, and polling currently shows that he's going to win by a likely margin. Any margin over 12% is solid, anything from 5 to 12 is likely, anything from 1 to 5 is lean, and any margin less than 1% will be categorized as being tilt. Down in Arizona, this is another competitive state. Joe Biden actually won Arizona in 2020, winning it by 0.3% after Trump defeated Clinton here 4 years prior by nearly 4 points. We're probably going to see a return to this type of 2016 margin, as the polling in Arizona also shows Kamala Harris behind by 7 points. We have 3 polls conducted in 2024 so far. They show Trump leading by 6, by 9, and by 7. It really doesn't seem like it's going to be all too close. Arizona, Trump will be able to flip back this November based on the numbers we have. Arizona will also be likely Republican. Before we move on to Colorado and New Mexico, we're going to fill in these rural states in the middle of the country where Trump has performed very well in over the last 2 election cycles. We don't have polling from them for 2024, but Trump was defeating Biden by solid margins in these states prior to the president dropping out, and Kamala Harris being on the ballot really isn't going to change anything here. The 2nd district of Nebraska right now is expected to be lean Republican, and we're going to go over the numbers once we get them from the district. But it's pretty safe to say that Kamala Harris is not going to win the 2nd district. Colorado and New Mexico, these are 2 states that Biden won by pretty large margins in 2020. Colorado by 14 points, New Mexico by 10.8. Joe Biden really did do well, although Hillary Clinton only won Colorado by 5 and New Mexico by 8. We don't have any polling between Harris and Trump for these 2 states, but I'm going to be generous to the vice president and place them both into the likely Democratic categories, although definitely there's a chance of either of these states or even both going down into that likely range. Before we continue, only 10% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and follow me on Twitter for daily political updates. Link in the description below. Moving on to Texas, 40 electoral votes. The Lone Star State is going to be a big prize for Donald Trump. Republicans haven't won Texas by a solid margin since 2012 when Mitt Romney was the nominee. Donald Trump hasn't been the best candidate for Republicans in this state. He only won Texas by 9 points in 2016 and by just 5 points in 2020. But looking at what we're seeing in 2024, the former president is on track to win Texas by a solid margin. We only have 1 poll from this year so far conducted conducted by YouGov, and it shows Trump leading Harris by 13 points, 52-39. This poll from May was conducted back in 2023, so obviously it's not going to be too representative of what we're seeing right now. And so Texas, according to the only poll that we have anytime from 2024, shows the state as solid red for Donald Trump. This will put him up at 98 electoral votes. Trump is also going to win Alaska. Don't have any polling there, but there's no doubt it's going to be a safe red state, while Hawaii is going to go for Kamala Harris. Yes, Biden did not do a good job handling the Maui fires, but the state simply is too blue for it to vote any other way, although I would definitely not be surprised if that margin goes down to closer to 15 to 20 points instead of the 29 that Biden won by 4 years ago. Moving up to the Midwest, this region is going to be equally as important with Harris as the nominee instead of Biden. She really has to do well here if she wants to win the election. Essentially, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, they're almost must-win states for the vice president. And right now, we don't actually have any data from Minnesota. However, this is a state that Biden won by 7 points, although Clinton only carried it by 1.5. Minnesota can get competitive, and honestly, Kamala Harris's quality as a candidate is closer to that of Clinton's than that of Biden's in 2020. It could be argued that she's a better candidate than Joe Biden would have been for 2024, but she is definitely not in nearly as favorable of a position as Biden was 4 years ago. Minnesota right now, we're going to be generous to Harris and place it into the lean Democratic category. However, Iowa and Ohio, they're both going to be pretty red this time around. We're going to look at Ohio in just a few moments, but Iowa is a state that's been waiting to be solid Republican, and in 2024, that is probably going to happen. Up in Wisconsin, though, we have quite a bit of polling from this state. It's going to be really important. This was actually the state that got Joe Biden over 270 electoral votes in 2020, and it did the same thing for Donald Trump in 2016. So looking at polling for Harris and Trump here, we see Donald Trump leading on average by 3%. We have 4 polls that have been conducted in 2024 so far. The most recent one, this was a Democratic-funded poll, keep in mind, showed the two candidates in a tie, although other polls had Trump leading by 1, by 8, and by 3. So it is kind of all over the place, but one thing's clear is that Trump has the advantage right now, so Wisconsin is going to be lean Republican. Illinois is going to be solid blue. Obama, Clinton, and Biden all won this state by 17% in the last 3 elections, so we're just going to give Kamala Harris the benefit of the doubt here. Indiana, Donald Trump's obviously going to win by at least 12%, even without Mike Pence on the ticket. But Michigan, this state is crucial for Kamala Harris. If she loses Michigan, she essentially loses the election. Joe Biden won Michigan by 3 points in 2020, but Donald Trump carried the state by 0.2 in 2016. Looking at polling for 2024 between Harris and Trump, the numbers aren't too conclusive, although according to the most recent poll, this was sponsored by a Democratic partisan sponsor, Trump leads by 5%. Honestly, not what the Harris campaign wants to see. 2 other polls conducted recently show an even race, and Trump leading by 3. So on average, the former president is ahead by 3%, but we're just going to have to wait and see what happens in the new polls that will be conducted. But right now, this is not a good starting place for the vice president. In Ohio, 17 electoral votes. The state used to be among the most competitive. It was actually a bellwether. For more than 60 years, Ohio always voted with the eventual presidential election winner, but that streak ended in 2020 when Joe Biden won the election but lost Ohio by 8%. Today, Donald Trump leads by 13 points in the state, and with J.D. Vance, the incumbent senator from Ohio, as his running mate, there's no doubt that the Buckeye State will be solid red this November. To finish off the Midwest, we're going to look at Pennsylvania's 19 electoral votes. It's going to be very difficult for Harris to get to 270 without the Keystone State. This is actually Joe Biden's home state, so Biden would have had that advantage if he had stayed in. However, Kamala Harris has no connection to the state, although if she does choose Josh Shapiro to be her running mate, that would definitely give her a little bit of an advantage, although a lot of people do not want to be Kamala Harris's vice president right now, because if they lose, their political careers are essentially over, and right now it really doesn't seem like Kamala Harris is on track to win. Looking at the polling in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump has led in every single poll so far, and based on the most recent surveys, he leads by 4% statewide. A lot of these polls are conducted in July, which means that they were conducted when serious doubts about Biden's candidacy started to arise, so they're going to be a lot more accurate than what we're seeing in many other states, as these polls are pretty up to date. And even according to new numbers, Kamala Harris isn't performing well. She's behind by 4 points. Pennsylvania will be lean Republican on our map. Moving up to the Northeast, we're going to start off by filling in the solid blue states of Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Biden's home state of Delaware, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. So these states just really aren't going to be close. However, New York is going to be a lot more competitive. Kamala Harris leads by just 11 points in the state, and many polls at the end of Biden's campaign showed that he was not going to win the Empire State by a solid margin. He actually led by 7 points, according to the Real Clear Politics polling average. Looking at Biden's margin from 2020, 23%. That's how much Democrats have fallen in the last 4 years. New York is not the solid blue stronghold that it once was. So right now, the state is on track to being likely for Kamala Harris. New Jersey Democrats are doing really poorly there as well because of Bob Menendez and his felony convictions as a senator. He is still a sitting senator, and the Senate race to replace him in New Jersey is pretty competitive. Republicans are doing a lot better than they typically would because of Menendez's scandal. Up in New Hampshire, Kamala Harris is actually behind in the only poll we've gotten from the state so far. Donald Trump leads by 2%. This is according to the Trafalgar Group, and this is a poll conducted in December of 2023. It's all the data we have to work with right now. So the Granite State is going to be lean Republican. Maine is going to be pretty competitive as well. We don't have any polling between Trump and Harris yet, but it does seem like the first district will be solid blue, the second district solid red, and the state as a whole, Democrats still have a slight advantage. We'll have to see what the new polling shows us, but right now, we're going to place it into the lean Democratic category, a lot closer than Biden's 9-point performance in the last election. Moving down to the south, we're going to begin by filling in the solid red states of Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia, and just focus on the 4 more competitive races. Beginning in Virginia, there was a lot of talk about Joe Biden losing the Commonwealth of Virginia. This would be pretty abysmal for Democrats, considering they've made a lot of progress in the state over the last 10 years. If you look at what Virginia was like in 2008, Barack Obama only carried the state by 6.3%, and in 2012 by 3.9%. There was actually a 10-year period up until 2021 when no Republicans won statewide office in Virginia. That ended with the election of Glenn Youngkin as governor, but looking at polling for 2024, the most recent polls actually show Trump in the lead. It is pretty amazing to see that Republicans right now could win Virginia. Now, there are some earlier polls from earlier in the month of July that show Harris ahead. So on average, the vice president still maintains around a 1-point lead. These polls, a lot of them show many different types of questioning, some with Kennedy in the race, some with likely voters, with registered voters. So it's not as many polls as what it seems like, but Kamala Harris does have a very slight edge, so we're going to place it into the tilt Democratic column. Down in New Hampshire, a state that was pretty close in 2020, there was a lot of talk about Joe Biden potentially flipping it. In the end, that didn't happen, and it's obviously not going to happen in 2024. Kamala Harris is behind by 9.5% on average. One poll from a Morning Consult, one from Emerson College, 2 pretty big pollsters. They all show Trump easily on track to winning the Tar Heel state for a 3rd time in a row. So North Carolina is going to be likely Republican. We're seeing something pretty similar in Georgia, another state that was competitive in 2020. Joe Biden actually won it this time by 0.24%. A big surprise. A lot of people thought North Carolina was going to vote to the left of Georgia, but that ended up not being the case. And looking at the latest polls from the Peach State, again, a lot of these polls are essentially just one poll, but they ask various different types of questions. But on average, Donald Trump leads by 8% in the state of Georgia. I mean, just look at these numbers. It is not close. Not a single poll has Trump leading by less than 4%. Some of them have him up by a double-digit margin. So Kamala Harris is going to get destroyed in the state of Georgia. It's going to be likely Republican, and so will Florida. 30 electoral votes votes to Sunshine State. It used to be very competitive. Joe Biden actually only lost Florida by 3 points in 2020, and this was considered a pretty big margin. Today, though, Donald Trump leads by a 10-point margin according to the only poll we've gotten from Florida in 2024 so far. These two polls conducted in September were from 2022 and 2023, so honestly we can disregard them. As of right now, based on any polls that have been conducted even remotely recently, Donald Trump leads by a double-digit margin, so Florida will be likely Republican. And so based on the latest polls, Donald Trump is on track to win 317 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 221. And of course, we'll get a lot more data coming out in the next few weeks, and I'll make sure to keep you guys updated on that. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, like this video down below, comment down below who you think is going to win between Harris and Trump, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November.